Good day and welcome to More Financial Talk. I'm Ryan Moore, and with me today is co-host Tony Shore. How are you doing, Tony?
Ryan, never better. I've had a great week. Just been keeping busy, which keeps me out of trouble. That's a good thing. Got a lot done this past weekend at the house. Didn't have to go down and visit with my parents this weekend or help them. So I had a weekend at home finally, and it really was needed. It kind of winterized everything, getting ready for the fall and winter here. How about you? How have you been?
Yeah, doing well, just rocking and rolling.
You're
Rolling
busy.
stone gathers no moss, right? Didn't they once say that?
Right. Yeah, you've definitely not been gathering moss. I know you've been burning the candle at both ends, haven't you?
Yeah, we got a lot going on right
Yeah.
now. Holidays are upon us. We do a big client appreciation gala every year in the early part of December. So this will be our ninth year in a row doing that, and it's our way of giving back to our clients. It's a big fun night. We raffle off a bunch of gifts. It's dinner, drinks. We spotlight our charitable endeavors for the year, and um, bring in one of the Gradient portfolio managers this year. We have the pleasure of having President of Gradient Investments, Mike Binger, coming
Oh,
in to be our
wow.
guest speaker. And so last year we had about 300 folks. This year we're expecting more than that. So there's a lot that goes into it. My wife does all the planning. This year we have had some help with our new marketing director, Michelle Perret. So
Yeah,
it's kind of taken the edge off of her a little bit. But
that's good.
when we get to this time of year, the gala preparation overflows into our house with all kinds of boxes and gifts and decor in preparation for. So
Yeah.
anyway, we're in the throes of all that, but excited. And once we get past Thanksgiving here, that will be upon us very quickly. So
Oh, for sure. Well, that sounds great. It sounds like a good time, and wow, you really have been growing. I know the company's growing there, and Retirement Solutions Group (RSG), and that big client event that you throw for your clients each year is a good one. And you got Mike Binger; he is great. He was on, was it Fox Business News channel the other day? I saw him on there. So he's an A-lister. That's great that you got him. He really knows about the market, so that's a good thing. Yeah, I know your clients will enjoy meeting him and talking him about their portfolios and where they're at. So that's good. Now, today I know we're continuing a discussion from our last show. Our last show was financial steps to take before and after retirement, and now we're looking at some more of those steps. We didn't get all the way through that discussion, and there are many steps people need to know about, right, Ryan?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to kind of bring everybody back on the same page here,
Sure.
essentially there are, two stages to our financial lives. And in the previous episode, we covered the first phase of our financial lives, which is the accumulation and growth phase, where essentially we're trying to build and accumulate. I call it climbing the mountain, to get to the precipice to where we feel like we have enough to last us when we start to consider to transition into retirement, which takes us to, post-retirement strategies, which essentially is the distribution phase. How do we take all of our hard-earned savings and nest egg dollars and essentially live off those dollars without running out of money too fast? And that's the number one fear of retirees today, is outliving what they've got. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is that second phase and how you come down the mountain safely. I often talk about the Mount Everest analogy, because it is a statistical known fact that more people die coming down Mount Everest than climbing up the mountain. And I
Right.
think the same can be true when it comes to financial planning. If you're not careful and you don't have the right discipline and you didn't save properly and you make some missteps along the way, then you can have a whole new set of challenges. And so I do think that when it comes to distribution planning, it's important to align with the appropriate advisor, because I do not believe that we're all sort of created equal. We all have our different niches and expertise categories. And my focus has always been the coming down the mountain phase, the distribution phase, which is building, retirement income plans, which is a roadmap for retirement that's fluid and adaptable. But ultimately, setting up the right income plan so that you are not drawing down money too quick or taking from the wrong buckets. There's also tax implications with all of this. So this is a loaded topic, and this is the niche focus and what my entire career has really culminated to.
Yeah. Yeah, and, yeah, exactly. You've been doing this for so long, and most of us, like I always say, my wife and I, we're only gonna go through this retirement process and planning process once. We're only gonna retire once, but you do this day in and day out, don't you? And that's how you know the pitfalls for our listeners out there and viewers to avoid.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in the trenches with the clients, and it's a working relationship, and we collaborate together. I often use the sports analogy where my clients, they're the owner of the franchise and I'm acting as their GM. And the GM's role is to bring the players to the table. So I've got my local team in my office, I've got local strategic partners, I've got national strategic partners, and our job is to essentially, help win the games and report back to the owner of the franchise because they're still calling the shots and driving the bus, but ultimately, they're employing us to be their hands and feet on the ground and ultimately guide them and educate them properly throughout the process and whatever gets thrown their way. So, what's real fun going back to the gala that we do every year is every year I ask everybody in the crowd, whoever has retired with the assistance of transitioning into retirement with the assistance of RSG, please stand up. And that's really a proud moment, as over the years we've just seen more and more folks stand to be recognized. And that's where I get a lot of fulfillment is playing a part and helping people make that big leap, which is uncomfortable to many because we're used to getting a paycheck in our adult lives. And then there's a big change when that paycheck stops rolling in and then you're relying on your own resources.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think that's important. Now, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or remind our listeners of from the last show?
Well, just, again, the accumulation in growth phase, I think the biggest thing there is, how are you saving? Are you saving properly in terms of what you are planning for down the road, right? We want to be proactive, so we want to look ahead. We want to have a vision for where we want to end up, and then we reverse engineer how we're getting there, as opposed to being reactive to what might have just happened in the previous year or not looking too far ahead. So the big thing there is I think the tax implications of how you're saving is, a big niche focus. So the way I phrase it is, would you rather pay taxes on the seed or pay taxes on the harvest? And so if you're growing your money effectively from a tax standpoint, you're going to want to use Roth strategies, Roth 401ks, Roth self-directed accounts, or even Roth conversions once you have accumulated in the pre-tax deferred bucket. And that way you're positioning yourself for a more tax efficient retirement once you get to the distribution phase. So if I were to focus on any one thing I would want to emphasize in the accumulation phase of our money is how are you saving, and are you saving in the right buckets with a methodical approach to how it's going to ultimately end up in the end.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and I know we talked a lot about that, what to do during the accumulation phase, mistakes to avoid. But where do you want to begin today's discussion as far as some more steps to take either before or after we retire?
Yeah, so I believe altogether we're covering 12 steps, six on
Yep.
the upside, six on the downside in terms of, the climbing the mountain
Yep.
analogy. And so we're on step number 7, which is post-retirement. And the
Sure.
first one we'll talk about is Social Security and your Social Security timing decision. So this is a big one, and
It's
it's
huge.
typically what everybody's going to face at some point. And without getting into a big, dissertation about Social Security, I think there are some things that I think are worth touching on, which is, for one, making sure that you are looking at this properly. And so when we look at Social Security timing, we're typically going to be using maximization software, where we use a software program that ultimately is designed to give you the most optimized timing to get the most out of your lifetime benefits. And so with that, we don't believe that this particular puzzle piece, Social Security, is mutually exclusive of all of the other puzzle pieces. So when we run that software, we're doing it to get the intel to see what it's recommending, but it's still got to fit with everything else, right? And so with that, I think that's where, communicating with the clients and looking at other factors helps determine where the sweet spot is in the timing of, turning on your benefits. So we want to create an optimal claiming strategy with some thought behind it, and not just, hey, I want to take it as soon as I can because I think Social Security is going to go away, right? And
Right.
so for that reason, we don't want to make decisions out of fear or emotion. We want to have some planning logic behind it.
Right. And tell our listeners, Ryan, why it is so critical to file at the right time and not file at the wrong time. It can make a huge financial impact on your retirement overall, right?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, the longer you wait, the more, the bigger the benefit will be when it comes to Social Security. But, a lot of times the software is going to recommend that you delay. And the latest that you can delay to is age 70, at
Sure.
which point, that's maximizing your benefit. But if you're trying to retire at 65, that could be 5 years that you're not taking that Social Security income. And therefore, where are we making that particular part of our income? Where are we making it up from? Which is typically going to be the nest egg. The concern
Sure.
there is, what if somebody dies prematurely in a spousal situation? Somebody dies in their 70s, right? Then the surviving spouse will get the greater of the two Social Security benefits, but they could be leaving that survivor with a somewhat depleted nest egg and less Social Security income resources. So,
If they lock it in at a lower amount, and once you lock it in, you're stuck with that lower amount. Like so many people, Ryan, take it at 62, which is the soonest you can possibly take it, but it's reduced by almost 30% at that point. Between that and your full retirement age, it's close to 30% reduction. So you're locking in a much lower amount between that and age 67, and then especially between that and age 70, then, from what you're saying.
correct. So those that, tend to take the emotional approach, I'm going to turn it on while I can. What many don't realize is if they're still working and they make over a certain threshold dollar amount, which earned income is, I think this year it was 23,400, somewhere in that range. If you make more than that, for every $2 over that amount that you earn, they're going to withhold $1 of your benefit amount. So you're going to get, benefits withheld. And so that's why I would say, let's make sure, if you're going to turn on Social Security, that you're truly retired, or you're making less than roughly 23,000 a year. So there's a lot that goes into this topic. One thing that is interesting to me is, most advisors don't really mess with this. I'll do a Social Security workshop and I'll have 30, 40 people in the room. And I know most people have, advisor help or advisor representation, but yet they'll tell clients, well, we don't really deal with this or do this. You got to kind of figure it out on your own. Well, Social Security represents 30 to 40% of most people's income in retirement. And most of these advisors are calling themselves fiduciaries, which they are legally obligated to do what's in the client's best interest first. So look, it's not a fun topic to learn and really become an expert at, but I think it's pretty valuable to your clients based on the fact that most people are going to be making this type of decision at some point. So it's something I dug in on years ago, and why I feel good about teaching this, because it just brings more value to my clients and they feel more confident in getting, the right analyzation as to what is the best timing and the sweet spot for activating benefits.
Yeah. Sounds good. I mean, obviously, Social Security, you've mentioned before, Ryan, it's the foundation, it's the starting point, because it's a known factor. We can figure out what that amount's going to be each month, and then, like you said, you use it really as a puzzle piece to fit with everything else, and you need to know that. And so I'm glad post-retirement, that's probably or at retirement, that's the most important thing. When you file for Social Security is huge. What's next? What's another step to take after retirement?
So step number 8, or number 2 on the post-retirement phase of our lives, would be the bucket strategy, specifically for withdrawals.
Okay.
So what is the best way to take money out? And really, we have to be very careful of this, because if you are pulling money from the wrong buckets, money won't last as long. So
Right.
specifically, I think a big mistake that can be made is drawing from equities or stocks as part of your consistent income flow, or growth funds, or maybe even stock and bond blended funds. So essentially, stocks are going to have more fluctuation, right? And so if you're taking money out every month as part of your your lifestyle need for covering expenses, etc. Right? And if you're taking money out every month, but stocks go up and down, and at times they're going to be correcting or corrective phase, then it's like you're taking two withdrawals when markets are going down, but you only get to keep one. And that's a way to dig a hole that you may never get out of, because how do you rebound from something that, digs a big hole when you have to keep taking money out? So for that reason, I don't think it's very prudent to be withdrawing from equities. Now, it is important to rebalance your growth portfolio portions, where if you've had a lot of growth, it can pull you out of your risk tolerance. So that's where you want to rein in the risk by rebalancing. However, when you're at a distribution phase and you're taking withdrawals to live off of, we would recommend building out a bond bucket. So even though bonds may not be carrying the weight like they used to in terms of yield and providing a greater level of income than they are today, though, they're going to be more stable positions. I've said this in past episodes where we look at stocks like tires on a car. Okay, when you're driving down the road and the road gets real bumpy and those tires are moving up and down, okay, that's volatility in the market. But when you enter in bonds are acting like the shocks on the tires, smoothing out the ride. So that, to me, would be the place to pull withdrawals from out of the bond bucket. And we know that ultimately could spend down the bond bucket. And that's where we're monitoring, further ahead as to when we might want to rebalance some of the growth in the equities and then replenish the bond bucket and keep the income flowing. So when we build out the bond bucket, we're typically going to be putting in 1 year to 2 years worth of income, so that we have a longer time frame to evaluate the equity side of things, to make sure that when we rebalance, it's at the right time and not pulling from equities to replenish that bond bucket when markets are down. So the concept here is just making sure you're drawing from the right places and ultimately, being mindful of it.
Yeah, and you might, I mean, you didn't get into this aspect, but I know you've mentioned it before, and that's the different tax buckets. You might have one bucket that's tax free as well to pull from at certain times, but a withdrawal strategy is so critical. I'm glad you brought that up, and I know that's something you work hard on with your clients to get right for them, so they don't have to pull money out of the market during a down market. That's absolutely huge. Now, the next one on the list I know is something that is pretty pertinent right now at this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, which is the fun topic of Medicare, which I affectionately refer to as alphabet soup.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
And yes, we are in annual election period, which goes from October 15th to December 7th. And this is an opportunity for people to reevaluate their plans, specifically Medicare Advantage plans and prescription drug plans. Medicare supplements can be changed around throughout the year, and many are confused by that, thinking that if they want to evaluate their supplement, they only have this same annual election window to do that. But supplements are eligible to, reevaluate or change around throughout the year, just to be clear on that. But so navigating Medicare enrollment, this is an important puzzle piece for everybody as it relates to healthcare. And with that, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot to digest and really make sure you understand your options. I think the tendency is when people get about 6 months away from age 65, which is the, age 65 was when Medicare begins. Unless you're still working and you have credible coverage, then you don't necessarily have to get on Medicare. But prior to turning 65, people are on these insurance companies' radars. They provide lists of people that are approaching that age 65 period in their life. And therefore, that's when folks start to get inundated with stuff in the mail, lots of brochures and marketing materials, and your phones are going to be ringing, at the dinner hour to essentially try to, get you on the phone to talk through your Medicare options and potentially try to enroll you over the phone. I'm concerned with folks that would approach it that way, because that's pretty challenging to really digest such a wide-ranging topic, either through marketing brochures or a single telephone call.
Yeah.
So I've taken pride in wanting to make sure that we are very much up to speed with Medicare in our business, in our practice. And years ago, I dug in, I became an expert at Medicare, but nowadays it's just not the best use of my time trying to run this company. And so with that, we do have an in-house Medicare specialist. His name is Norm Cook. Norm worked for Humana for 19 years as a Medicare sales manager. We had Norm on just a few weeks ago on the podcast, so anybody could go back and listen to my time with Norm. But Norm, I think he's tremendous at this. One of the best I've ever come across with Medicare, just because he has so much patience with it, with the folks, helping them to really understand all the letters of the alphabet that go into Medicare, but making sure they really understand their benefit options. And he's kind of a coverage analyst, where he's going to help you look at the different coverage pros and cons depending on the particular plan. But like I said, he's got a lot of patience, he's got a lot of passion for this topic, and he's just really service driven to help folks in the right manner. So I always recommend having a healthcare advocate or advisor, somebody that specifically is helping you with that aspect of retirement, so that year over year you can evaluate your options, your prescription drug plans as your medications may change. So should your plan potentially. So that's why we love having Norm on board with us, and the feedback I get from my clients is nothing but tremendous.
That's great. Yeah, he was great on the show. I encourage our listeners to go back and listen to that episode on Medicare. He really knows his stuff, and if they have questions for him, they can contact your office there. Now, that's Medicare and navigating Medicare. That can be complex. What's next on the list? I think we're at number 10.
Yeah, so this would be the tax efficient withdrawal order. So this kind of goes back into the buckets of how you take money out, in relation to retirement and creating the necessary income to maintain standard of living. So really there should be a pecking order in terms of the right place to go to withdraw money first. Now, I'll talk about what you want to put at the end of the line, first and foremost, which is Roth money. So again, Roth IRAs allow you to grow your money tax-free. So in my opinion, in the opinion of many, you would want to use that money last. So essentially you're giving the Roth money the longest runway possible to reap the most tax-free benefits. So the longer you let it grow, the more tax-free growth supposedly that you're going to build within those accounts. So think of it like this. You want to be growing your Roth money while your IRA, your pre-tax money, is essentially depleting. So eventually when that IRA money goes away, then you transition to the tax-free. And at that point, you've maximized growth on that, and, will reap the benefits of living a more tax-efficient retirement. And some people, when structured properly, can actually be in the 0% tax bracket. And that delves into the concept of the power of zero with the national best-selling author, David McKnight, who I work with,
Yep.
and I'm a Power of Zero advisor.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is making sure that you put the tax-free money at the end of the line. And then from there, I believe that when it comes to the taxable bucket and the tax-deferred bucket, I think this is where a little bit of customization comes in, because everybody's circumstances are different. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said it. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's circumstances are different. And that's why you get to know the people and their circumstances before you make specific recommendations. They need to plan in each of these categories you're talking about, but they need to work with a fiduciary like yourself, who's going to look out for their best interests and help them make the decisions based on their personal goals, their personal situation, their time horizon, so many factors. And you don't use a cookie cutter approach like some. And I think that's really, really important to note. Now, what's number 11 on the list?
Yeah, before we jump onto that one, just real quick, I wanted to add that, there's a reason why many folks will, call in or connect with me before they make a withdrawal, so that I can take a look at their overall situation. Where's the money needing to come from? And I can think of a situation just yesterday where the client was wanting to buy a new car, and they also wanted to take a distribution to donate to their church as we're approaching year end here. So when we looked at it, part of it is looking at, okay, well, where are you at in the income brackets for the year? And with this client, they had already done a Roth conversion earlier in the year. So if we took all of the needs now out of the IRA money that was going to ultimately, bring them further up the bracket and potentially tip them into the next bracket. So that's why for one of those withdrawals, we actually recommend using the taxable bucket, where we evaluated their short-term and long-term capital gains. And with that, we're trying to be prudent about, the taxable impacts. And, some years are going to be different than others based on people's needs. So again, I don't think it's one size fits all here. And not only every client circumstance is different, but every situation, circumstance could be different and need customization. So I think all that's very important. So they're not relying on me in terms of permission to get money out. It's really more about where's the best place to take it from based at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. And so now what is the next item on the list?
So it'd be review your estate plan and beneficiaries.
Yes.
Yeah. So as you're entering into retirement, these are good, responsible things to make sure you have in order. Starting with the beneficiaries. And I think we did a podcast on this a while back, Tony, where it's critically important to make sure that your beneficiary designations are up to date and that they are actually on these accounts. And every so often I'll run into somebody that, doesn't have a beneficiary on an account, and therefore that would be subject to probate, because when you have assigned beneficiaries at your death, that is assigning ownership to that asset and therefore would avoid probate. So beneficiary designations are very important, and that ties into estate planning, right? So whether you have a will or a trust, know the difference. One can cause probate, one can avoid probate. We've talked about this. And I teach on this extensively. I'm a certified estate planner. That doesn't make me an attorney, but I have some, expertise in this arena, as again, I've committed time in my career to delve into this to make sure I can be of value to folks on this aspect of planning and retirement. So we do work with multiple local attorney groups. And with that, we're very hands-on with the legal side of helping people make sure that all their ducks in a row are in a row as it relates to estate planning and their wishes and how they want things distributed upon their passing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of people put this off. They don't like to think about their own passing, but you also don't want to leave your loved ones in a bad situation. And you want to make sure you have beneficiaries listed so it can pass easily and quickly without courts and extra attorney fees. Both great points. Make sure you review those estate plan and beneficiaries, and that should happen long before you retire. But as you head into retirement, you got to make sure those are correct. That's good.
Yeah, those tend to be the things that we procrastinate on. Nobody likes to think about their own demise, essentially, but it really is beneficial to your loved ones, and I do think it's responsible to plan for what ultimately others are going to have to deal with. And so when you do retire, for those that have procrastinated while they're working, hopefully they've got a little bit more time to address those things and ultimately check those boxes. So we're here to help.
All right. Now we're up to number 12, the last one on the list for essential steps to take to be prepared for retirement. What is it?
So this gets into the loaded topic of long-term care planning, in which some, refer to as a major wild card, right? Because I don't think any of us ever dream of ending our days in a nursing home or, needing custodial care, but we don't know. And, hopefully we all die peacefully in our sleep, but we know for sure that that's not how it all plays out. In fact, they say there's a statistical odds of 70% of people over the age of 65 at some point will need convalescent care, right? And so the average stay in a nursing facility is just under 3 years. I think that average is a little bit skewed with dementia and Alzheimer's that can, delay that average. There's also a statistic that says people will be in and out of nursing home in less than a year. 47% of people will be in and out less than a year. That could be either because they're in there for recovery, where they, went into skilled nursing care for maybe a bypass surgery or hip replacement or something to that
Knee
effect. And they're not,
replacement, yeah.
yeah, and they're not ready to go home, either because, it's not where they're going home to are not equipped to, help that person recover. So it might cause them to have to get put into assisted living while they're recovering. And then they could be in and out of there in less than a year, or people do pass away in less than a year. So with all that, we want to have a plan for long-term care. I've never been one that's big on traditional long-term care policies.
Yeah.
So let's start there real quick. Those tend to, be most affordable when you're in your 50s, but the reality and the odds are that you're not going to need it until you're in your 80s. So you're going to be paying on something for 30 years. And what will happen likely is that the cost of those premiums for that policy will continue to go up. It will get to the point where you will question whether you even want to hang on to it anymore or not, which is usually around the time where you may need it the most. So that creates a big quandary for folks. So nowadays, because it is a growing issue, we have an aging population. Therefore, I think there are more alternative ways for guarding against this topic, and certain ways that are built into, investment strategies that can double as long-term care or impairment protection without having to buy an expensive policy. So that's the method that I am prone to guiding people towards, so that, hey, if you need it, we've got a plan. But if you don't need it, we're not paying on a bunch of money on something that we're never going to get back. So we don't want to stick our head in the sand on this either. So we don't want to ignore the topic. So therefore, we need to have some kind of plan for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. That's a tough one. It's so expensive. Both my parents are now in long-term care, and they're both in their 80s. And it's for my dad, it's $7,600 a month. For my mom, it's $11,000 a month. So
wow.
You have to have a plan, and there's hybrid products out there now that are better. There are a lot of things you can do. So work with a trusted financial services professional to make sure that you're looking at these things. So great show. A lot of advice today. How do you want to wrap it up? What do you want to leave our listeners with today, Ryan?
Well, look, I mean, again, according to Benjamin Franklin, failing to plan is planning to fail. And that's what we're all about, is having a plan. And ultimately, it just starts with a conversation, getting to know you. And then from there, we build a retirement roadmap. We call that the compass report. And it takes a lot of these things and it brings it all together. So you have a projection of how things are going to look in the future. And again, that's proactive planning. And it's a fluid plan. So it's adaptable. Life's going to throw things at you, right? You're going to get some curveballs that are going to come your way, and the plan needs to be able to hold up under those. So we always have the same mantra. We plan for the worst, we hope for the best. So if the worst happens, we have a plan. But if you plan for the best and the worst happens, that's when you get in trouble. So we're here to help. And with that, we can be reached directly at area code 615-467-6300. You can email our office at info@rsgtn.com, and our website is rsgtn.com. So thank you, Tony.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
Yeah, you too, Ryan. Great show today. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of More Financial Talk with our host, Ryan Moore.